For today's show, we invited Peter Tallman, President and CEO of Klondike Gold, to join us and provide a deeper look into their 2018 regional exploration program in the Yukon. For our audience at home, Klondike Gold trades in Canada under the symbol KG and in the US under KGF. The company completed a district-wide survey program which included airborne magnetic and radiometric surveying, soil surveying, geological mapping, structural mapping, and prospecting. This was the first time this type of work had been completed across the Klondike district. Happy to have you here, Peter.
Thank you very much.
To start off, can you give us an insight on why this work had not been done before?
So in its simplest form, the Klondike district property we have now is 557 square kilometers of ground. Traditionally, in the Klondike, people have staked maybe 30 or 50 or 100 claims. We have nearly 3,000. And so if you can imagine you're exploring your backyard and your neighbor's backyard and perhaps 30 of your closest friends' neighbor's backyard, whereas if we're in Vancouver, we're exploring the entire greater Vancouver district and area. And so bits and pieces were done, but it was never done systematically over the entire area. And even if you did have a fault, as an example, and it was in your backyard, it would cross your backyard, come in from one fence line, go out the other, and you had no idea where it went. Whereas what we've just done is survey using multiple different tools and platforms this entire district. And so we can see all of the structures, we can see soils, we can see chemistry, we can see rocks, and correlate them and map them from one place to another. And so that has never been done. And it's really exciting to see the results because they're completely different than anyone really conceived of previous to us.
Right. So that was the big thing, is to have this whole area to compile it all together, and all these extensive list of tools that are at your disposal. So I just wanted, so you first recognized the Rabbit Fault. That was back in 2014, and it was formerly referred to as the Rabbit Creek Thrust. So this is a very important structure, as it was the backbone of your exploration model and directing drill programs for these last 4 years. I'm curious, what led to the change?
Well, when I looked at the only data set that covered the entire district in 2014, it was an old Geological Survey of Canada magnetics survey done in 2002 that was really coarse and had poor resolution. It's kind of fuzzy. But in the fuzz, you could see that there was maybe this fault structure break something. And kind of imagined that. Until then, the gold mineralization in the Klondike had been cryptic. We didn't know why it was there or what controlled it. And that was a possibility. It's like, hey, look, there's a big fault there that maybe there's a big fault. It looks kind of like it. If it's there, that could be the thing that controls the gold. So what we did finally this past year was we imaged it. We did really detailed airborne magnetic surveying. And we can see clearly that there's a big break, magnetic break in the data, and that is the fault. So there's a second part of the question, though. Yeah, I called it the Rabbit Creek Thrust Fault in 2014 because on surface we had this unit that might have been a fault or a discontinuity. And 4 years later, we know that unit isn't the discontinuity that we thought. There may be one there somewhere, but we don't see it. And so I've gone back to not calling it a thrust and calling it more a fault. Technically, that's correct, as we wait to see more mapping data, basically.
And so the difference is that you don't have the discontinuity.
The discontinuity is there, but on surface, it's kind of cryptic, and we have to do more mapping and surveying to see it on surface. And there is a possibility that, in fact, it doesn't come to surface. This, to me, looks, the new data that we have looks to me like it shows a major basement break. So if you imagine, I don't know, stack two chocolate bars on top of each other, and the the lower chocolate bar is broken, but the upper one is continuous, and somehow you can see through it. That's what we're looking at. And the importance is that break, if it's a deep crustal break, is allowing gold-bearing fluids from the deep crust to penetrate up into the upper crust, which is where we're finding all the gold. And so what I'm really looking for are good conduits for gold mineralization that penetrate to the lower crust. And this one is, I think, the most likely thing we've seen yet.
Right. And then so this basement structure that you're talking about, the sandwich between two layers, that's typical of what you've seen at some other deposits?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So that's what you're targeting. So another question I had for you was, what is the orogenic model of gold mineralization here?
Well, and that really involves this basement structure. So basically, an orogeny is a mountain building event where you're pushing one package of rocks up over top of another. And the Himalayas are a great example of rocks being thrust up over one another, and you end up with these great high mountains you can climb. 100 million years ago or 140 million years ago, that was happening along the western North American seaboard, and rocks were pushed up onto the North American craton that include the Klondike district. And so there was mountain building, and so when you have two packages of rocks sliding one on top of the other, there is a discontinuity, a big basement fault under that top layer. And again, I think that's what we just imaged with the magnetics. And we're seeing this, basically the sliding plane along which the Klondike schists, the Klondike district rocks that we see today at surface, sliding over stuff that are deeper down.
Okay, so this is something I guess you've been postulating for a while now. You have more data to support that. But this was the first year, or was it the first year that you saw some similarity with the Coffee Gold project? I'm just wondering why it would be significant that, what you have there is also in another part of the Yukon.
Well, there's a couple of, number one, we would all like ideally, when we're all looking for gold in the same place, or in a district or in a region, if we're all finding the same style of gold, that suggests that the gold mineralization is widespread and can be relatively common, as opposed to if I found a little piece in my backyard and nobody else found anywhere else, then everyone would suspect, probably rightly, that was just kind of a one-off and it's not very important. So to see the mineralization that we see in the Klondike district, and it's also the exact same things with the exact same parameters and right down to individual small half-meter wide units, is occurring at the Coffee deposit, which they're developing into a mine. And also in the intervening terrain, it's actually the White Gold district seems to have similar characteristics too. That suggests to me that there's an overlooked and widespread gold mineralizing event throughout the entire region. And that makes me far more comfortable and even excited to be exploring the Klondike, because I think we can look at it, I call it the Klondike district, just like the Coffee district and the White Gold district. It has district scale potential for gold mineralization.
Right. Yeah, and then to have something, if it's a commonality across the whole Yukon, then you have the scale as well.
If the gold is at Coffee in the same way the gold is at White Gold, in the same way that the gold is in the Klondike, then it's 120 kilometers across strike to Coffee, and all of that ground from one side to the other is prospective for the same style of gold mineralization. And then along strike, there's hundreds and hundreds of kilometers that are also prospective. It's really exciting because that can make it much, much bigger, and the scale is kind of world class.
Yeah, yeah, and this is really just emerging. So, compared to a lot of other districts of or around the world that have had hundreds of years of production, this would be huge to open
I'd,
up the
I'd,
Yukon.
I'd add to that because in 2018, November 2018, at Yukon Geoscience, when all of us geos get together, the three companies, and it was Coffee Gold Corp first, then White Gold, and then Klondike, and we presented this information back to back to back for the first time, and we all looked at each other and went, wait, that's all the same. We're seeing the same stuff in that district. And I think it got the point across that yes, it's just bigger than one small area. It's widespread, and the potential is that there's quite a bit more of it.
Right. So, and going back to the news release, so the Rabbit Fault, that is what you postulated was formed through orogenic process.
Correct. Yes. And now
Right.
we're seeing like real evidence of it, and we also have a broader framework that suggests for sure it's orogenic, and it is implicated in the gold mineralization. So I think I'm pretty comfortable thinking that we have the details of the orogenic gold deposit model, and most of their kind of checkbox characteristics.
Yeah. And then judging from the soil anomaly map that you had in your press release, all of the 9 new gold soil anomalies, they seem to stretch the full length of the 60-kilometer Rabbit Fault. Are some of these new targets that you weren't aware of before?
Most of them are new because those areas had never been soiled before. So although the placer mining historically, for 120 years ago up until now, all of that area is being actively placer mined today, and they're getting gold out of the creeks. Question has always been, where's all the gold coming from? Well, several of those anomalies are sitting kind of at the headwaters and up the hill from some of the richest creeks in the Klondike, and no one's really ever prospected there. No one's looked, and here we are sitting with these 3 by 2 square kilometer golden soil on a hill that's eroding directly into the creek below. That's a super rich placer. So I'm incredibly excited about that.
Yeah, having these anomalies spread along that whole length, and no one's looked at them before, especially no one's done all these surveys. Plus, you have found a lot of the gold in the first couple of years of drilling were in veins, and now you're finding them outside of the veins as well. So that was that something you said with all this 20 million ounces of alluvial gold that was found, that couldn't have been all from quartz veins?
Again, I don't think so. Physically, it's hard to take cloddy, flashy gold that's in a quartz vein and grind all the quartz veins down to something that's millimeter in scale to liberate that individual millimeter sized grain to dump it into a creek. And so, again, conceptually, I think there had to be, or conceptually, I thought there had to be another source. And the disseminated gold model, where you have just a little bit of gold in the host rock, and not captured in a hard quartz vein where it's hard to liberate it. It's in a soft rock and it's easy to liberate it, and that's what's really made its way into the creeks. And so we've ended up looking for 2 different styles of mineralization, one that's quartz veins and one that isn't. And to me, I still think volumetrically the vast majority of the gold is being liberated from zones of disseminated mineralization. That's rather than stuff that has quartz veins in it.
Right. Okay. Well, now you have a pretty good list here of targets. Gold soil anomalies that you recognize. Have you been drilling in the right places, or will you be shifting your priority to areas with higher gold and soil concentrations?
Well, the main target we've been drilling is the Lone Star Zone, and that's on on, well, one of the largest soil anomalies we have. So yes, we've been drilling the correct area there. The very other end of the district at Gold Run, we have another equal size gold and soil anomaly, and we've drilled only 4 holes. That was just kind of a flyer. I didn't even have the gold and soil anomaly data at the time. And as it turns out, I would drill those in different places. But yeah,
it's going to be hard to prioritize which ones to go first.
Well, I get that as an investor comment. That's a correct statement. It really is hard to prioritize because we don't have enough information to be able to compare how good one is against the other. But the importance of this news release describing all of these surveys is that we finally have the basic tools that we can start ciphering. Hey, look, is that better than this one? Is that disseminated? Is that quartz veins? Mostly we don't know that yet. We have to go there. But I think we can develop our own little checklist of exploration tools. Let's go look, and this is what we're dealing with. Good. Then we know what we can do then.
Right. Okay. Well, you have a lot of information to digest just from this season alone: airborne magnetics, geochemical surveys, structural mapping, lithological mapping. What would you explain? Would you explain the importance of the lithological mapping, and briefly describe what you learned?
Well, yeah, we now know that if you take it down to its basics, there's 3 different rock types in the Klondike district. One of them prefers to have disseminated gold in it, and it's softer. One of them doesn't have any disseminated gold in it, and it's really hard. But the hard one has quartz veins preferentially, and they seem to really like to have good, nice clots of visible gold in it. And then the third one is one that it just really doesn't like gold very much at all. And so now we know the distribution of all 3, and we have tools. Even we can look at the soils and say, we probably think that it's this rock type and not that one. And so we have the way to screen the entire district and go search out where all the gold is.
Right. So you have the screen now, and you're going to have boots on the ground reconnaissance. It's a massive property, like you said, 557 square kilometers. So it's pretty important that you know which lithology is or hosts the gold.
It means that we can not go to places now and we can kind of disregard them, or they're lower priority. Let's worry about that later. We're going to go over here to all of our high priority soil anomalies that have the right rock types. And once you get there, we have a soil anomaly. We already have kind of an idea what we're looking for. Are we looking for, splashy quartz veins that are white? They're usually obvious. You can kick over them and find them everywhere. Or are we looking for the far more subtle ones, which are this disseminated unit? And that's harder to find and recognize and harder to test for.
Yeah, and you have some previous workings that you can go to and see all that. It's open up at the surface.
Yeah, well, about half of those soil anomalies have no work of any sort on them whatsoever. So it'll be a voyage of discovery.
Right. Well, it's still early stages. So, and with this news release, I'm looking at a lot of information here, and with my limited knowledge here, I'm trying to review each piece by piece. But for me, it's harder to see the bigger picture. So can you kind of share with us what all this data means when you put all the layers together?
Well, and you can't look at it piece by piece and understand it. The exciting bit is actually taking it all and integrating it, because it forms a pattern. And the basic result of there's a big basement fault underneath the Klondike that's likely one of these structures that creates room for gold-bearing fluids to come from the lower mantle or the upper mantle into the upper crust. That's good. That's a great site for gold mineralization potentially. And then at surface, looking at all the soil anomalies, go, well, okay, here are these big areas of soil anomaly. The place is unglaciated, so the gold in soils must be local. And all of those, all the soil anomalies are sitting on topo highs, so they're up on kind of a hill. And so then we look at the other geophysical signature. We did radiometrics, and the individual rock types have different radiometric signatures. That's important. Prospecting, Wes Keats has been out for years finding all these old bedrock shafts where old-time prospectors were digging into the bedrock, chasing stuff. And they didn't do that lightly because that's an enormous amount of work. And when we map all of that and plot it up, you go, well, just look at that. Those shafts follow lines that correspond to our faults. And they were chasing the same thing. They didn't know it, but we can see that in that kind of data set. And then the prospecting has also found lots of gold in bedrock as well. So just the compendium of it says that we're certainly on the right track. We have been drilling Lone Star for the last couple of years. We've kind of stepped off into Nugget. We have a feel for both the disseminated and the quartz vein styles of mineralization and what they can give us in terms of potentially, economic intersections, maybe. Are they a gram over 100 meters is Lone Star, 2.5 grams over 25 meters is Nugget. So yeah, we're so far ahead of where we were 4 years ago. It's not funny, and it needs that multidisciplinary perspective to see it.
That's great, Peter, and it's exciting to hear that this new information lines up with all the discoveries you made in the last 4 years. I think that's all the time we have for our show today. I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts with everybody here.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
And I also want to thank everybody at home for joining us on the show. For more information on Klondike Gold, you can visit their website at klondikegoldcorp.com.